a prescription opioid medication. It helps relieve pain, but one of the side effects is respiratory depression. That means the breathing rate goes down if you take too much of it. One of the medicines that we give to counteract that is something called Narcan or naloxone, and this is what it looks like.
Yes.
And that is that.
So now,
save.
yes. So now what we do is when we give heroin addicts kits to take with them, this is part of it. And all people who are addicted or have dependence problems with narcotics should have this available because this reverses the respiratory
If
depression.
what TMZ has been reporting is true, when Prince made that emergency landing, he was admitted to the hospital and was given a save shot.
This is probably
like
what they're
this.
talking about.
They wanted him to stay.
Correct.
And he left after 3
Does
hours.
it make sense to you at all? Because the initial report was flu. Often you hear famous people have exhaustion. They never
Yeah.
have exhaustion. It's usually a drug thing.
Right.
They stopped in Moline, Illinois. Was what, 40 minutes?
They
Right.
were almost home.
Exactly.
Going.
Exactly.
That sounds very strange for
Yeah.
the flu, does
Yeah.
it not?
Here's the most interesting thing. They say up to 60% of people who die from accidental narcotic overdose are not dependent and don't have an addiction problem. These are people who accidentally take more medicine. 60%.
Really?
Accidentally
So
take too much
you're
medication.
in pain, you take
I
this
wonder
medication.
more and
Yeah,
more.
exactly. So
people-
you take one, it doesn't work, you take two, then you forget, you take a third, and
Well,
suddenly,
how long are you supposed to wait in between?
well,
these?
usually 4 to 6 hours between the pills, but what happens is it takes about a half hour to an hour for these to kick in, and so you take it, it doesn't work, you're in a lot of pain, you take
Yeah.
more, and this adds up over time.
Right.
Had he not had hip surgery, is that correct?
He had,
So he had been
so
using a
we don't
cane.
know, even if he was taking it, it could be for a legitimate reason, right?
Right.
And what happens is if you have the flu or some other reason that your respiration isn't working perfectly, and then you take the medication, that's a bigger
It
problem.
speaks to something we've talked about, you've talked about here a lot. We fell in love with pain-relieving medications in this country to our detriment.
Yes.
Yeah.
It helps people,
Yeah.
it hurts
They
people.
can't get off of it.
Absolutely. So we went from not giving enough to perhaps giving too much. And, you know, the issues are as we're making the legal drugs harder to get, people are going more towards illegal
Right.
drugs, right? So heroin and all of these other medications
Kind
which
of
have the same
become a
effect.
gateway.
Now, the other thing also is that this medication only works for a short period of time, and that's why you need to be monitored to make sure that once this wears off, the narcotic doesn't come back because it's still in your system.
Yeah. There is controversy, you're still holding the
Right,
naloxone right there.
Yeah.
There's controversy about this, it's a cultural controversy. Some people say, don't give it to addicts because it only encourages their usage. What is your position on that?
I think if you can save a life, I don't think addicts are not going to take the medication because naloxone is available or
Yeah,
not available.
right.
So I think that for first responders, for people who are partners of people who have addiction issues, this should be available. If you find somebody unresponsive, instead of calling 911 and waiting,
Right.
if you have this available, that's the first thing you do because if you don't have a narcotic overdose, the effect of this is very little.
Right.
There was another thing they were talking about that you can buy. It's like a nasal spray.
This comes
It's
in a
the same
nasal
thing.
spray.
This comes
Yeah.
in a nasal
It also
spray
has this,
form.
it's called Narcan as
Right.
well, so it's
Right.
all
What's
Okay.
confusing.
interesting to point out too is a lot of people were saying who knew Prince. You know, he was not involved
Yeah.
in drugs. He was not involved in alcohol.
Right.
The thing is, if you have an injury and you are prescribed something like Percocet, it happens to the best of people.
Exactly.
They get hooked.
Not only that, a lot of the respiratory medications have codeine in it, right? So there's a lot of different things that are going on and could be additive that could cause a problem. The other thing is, apparently he also had a history of epilepsy. So if you take too much Narcan, maybe they gave it to him, he took too much of it at home and
Maybe
he had
on
a
seizure
seizure.
medication
But
as
we
well.
don't know
I
any of
also
this.
think, though, that he had access to the
The
best
best
medical care you
of the
possibly
best,
could have,
right.
even discreetly.
But he also has access
The
to
problem is
whatever he
that when
wants.
people are super private, then that access, even though it's available, becomes very restricted.
And as a doctor, sometimes you have a hard time, you know, saying no to someone.
And
who
also
is
the
of
celebrity
that-
thing
that-
gets in the way
We
of,
saw that with
right.
Michael
look,
Jackson.
you live in
Yeah.
a celebrity town, you treat a lot of celebrity people.
I take care of all of these people, and you know, I just had a conversation last week, and I said, you need to go to the emergency room. You're in trouble. And the answer was, oh, no, I can't do
I
that.
can't, yeah.
So their lives are more affected by this lack of ability to access
Before we
healthcare.
go, last question for you. When you heard that it was the flu, what was your reaction?
A little bit of skepticism.